Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this online ordinary meeting of the Society. Minutes.
Society of Antiquaries of London, ordinary meeting, Thursday, the 8th of February 2024 at the University of Exeter. Professor Martin Millett, President, in the chair. The minutes of the ordinary meeting of Thursday, the 1st of February 2024 were read and signed. The following communication was then laid before the Society. People and Place in the Kingdom of Northumbria. New Project and Fieldwork Perspectives by Sarah Semple. Thanks for return for this communication. The President announced that the next meeting would be on Thursday, the 15th of February 2024, then adjourned the meeting. A reception followed.
Is it your wish that I sign these minutes as a true and complete record? No objections there then. Thanks. Can I just remind fellows that there is a ballot open at the moment if you haven't yet voted. That's open until the end of the month. We now turn to the main business of today's meeting, which is to hear a paper from Dr. Dustin Neighbours. Dr. Neighbours joining us this evening from the University of Helsinki, where he is the project coordinator and postdoctoral researcher for the Horizon EU-funded project Colour for Crafts. He's also a visiting researcher with the Department of Philosophy, History and Art at the University of Helsinki. Dustin completed his PhD at the University of York, supervised by our director, Dr. John Cooper, in 2018. He's an historian of England and Northern European history, specialising in the history of monarchy and court culture, with a particular emphasis on performativity of gender, material and political culture, cultural practices and activities like hunting we're going to hear about this evening in the 16th and 17th century. He's also specialist in the employment of digital methods of historical research. He's previously been postdoctoral researcher in the History Lab project at Aalto University and a postdoctoral research fellow at the Centre for Privacy Studies at the University of Copenhagen. He's also busily the administrator and digital content officer for the Royal Studies Network, along with being chair of the European branch of the Society of Court Studies. He's part of his research has, I'm glad to say, been funded by the Society through Janet Arnold Award. He's published very widely, I believe, lead editor on a volume that has just appeared or just about to appear from Amsterdam University Press, Notions of Privacy at the Early Modern European Courts. So welcome, Dustin. Our lecture this evening, the title is The Materiality and Historical Dress of Early Modern Hunting, an Interdisciplinary Approach. Very warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction, Professor Miller. I want to say a big thank you to the Society of Antiquaries for their support for this research and for allowing me this opportunity to share my work with you all. I also want to thank all of you for joining us, joining the seminar today. I hope you enjoy hearing about the research that I've been working on for the past year, that I'm now starting to put together for publication. So I look forward to your questions at the end. I'm going to go ahead and share. Okay, can everybody see that and can everybody hear me? Hopefully you can. Right. In a letter dated September 1560, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, observed that Queen Elizabeth I of England was, quote, a great huntress and does follow it daily from morning till night. Queen Elizabeth was a knowledgeable and skilled huntress, and she hunted almost every year of her reign, even right up until the very end, with her last hunting excursion in September 1602. Alternatively, With over 30 hunting residences and sites in the northern regions of the Holy Roman Empire, Elector August of Saxony and his wife Anna hunted frequently, and as indicated by the elector's letter in June of 1560, he and his wife hunted in rough, impassable terrain of the Ore Mountains and, quote, in the forest from morning till dusk. In Denmark, an eyewitness recounted in 1673 that the Queen Dowager Sophie Amalie, who had once killed 30 deer in a single day, had joined her son, the King Christian V, personal hunting party in which they chased a deer for several hours. When the deer was finally wounded, Christian got down from his horse, according to the eyewitness account. After some time, his mother, Sophie Amalie, Christian got down from his horse and raised his gun to kill the deer, but Christian froze, and he did not and could not kill the deer, according to the eyewitness account. After some time, his mother, Sophie Amalie, got down from her horse, walked over to her son, the king, and grabbed the gun he was holding, at which point she aimed the gun and fired, killing the deer instantly. Afterwards, she reportedly said, "The deer is dead," got back on a horse and rode off. And in 1681, an aging Queen Christina remarked in her memoir that she loved to hunt and that, quote, "those who took part in my passion were in despair, for I exhausted them completely and never let them rest, either by day or by night. When they tried to get me to stop this tiresome way of life, I teased them and said, if you're sleepy, go to bed. I can handle myself." These 4 cases are just a few of many examples of how extensively the hunt was pursued and practiced across early modern Europe. More importantly, these cases illustrate the physical intensity and longevity that many contemporaries engaged in the hunt. But what do we know about the materiality and material culture of the hunt? Were the clothing and objects connected to the hunt durable and able to sustain the rigors of such physical pursuits? What significance did hunting clothes and objects have on the sociability of the hunt and the identity of those engaged in the hunt? These questions form the basis of my 2023 Janet Arnold grant titled "The Materiality of the Hunt." Having worked extensively on the cultural and practices of hunting in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, this project has expanded my earlier research on hunting practice obtained from textual sources, particularly related to English hunting in the reign of Elizabeth I. It has slowly expanded to include the various textual sources of hunting in northern Germany, Denmark, Sweden, along with Finland as part of the Swedish Kingdom. Equipped with this knowledge, I have identified 3 problems that existed within the scholarship of hunting history. First, with the extensive source material documenting the various hunting practices in early modern Europe, there is a discrepancy between the textual and visual source material, or the art and depiction of hunting. The existing depictions of hunting often illustrated early modern figures in elaborate, sumptuous dress or as allegorical figures, like Queen Christina pictured here as Minerva, goddess of the hunt. She has also been associated with Diana, goddess of the hunt. These depictions reflect an idealized version of hunting in the period. Additionally, we know very little about female hunting garments, yet this idealized version does not match up to the realities of hunting practices. Second, hunting is often viewed as being solely a public ritual or spectacle in the cultivation or projection of power, which the evidence shows to be to the contrary. And finally, to date, there has been no extensive study of hunting material culture or hunting historical dress. Therefore, we do not have information about how hunting historical dress and objects were tied to sociability and identity. These problems underscore how the culture of hunting was much more nuanced and contextualized practice and distinctive to specific cultures. Based on these preliminary conditions, the project set out to identify the scope of and analyze the material culture, clothing, and heritage of hunting in the 16th and 17th century Europe. The project was not without its challenges. To begin, I want to emphasize that hunting history is fundamentally interdisciplinary because there's no single source that provides all the details or information of hunting activities, all of the information of hunting activities of a particular individual, community, or region. Instead, details must be collected from a variety of indirect sources, such as financial accounts, letters, diplomatic reports, chronicles, and history, and land management records. As such, hunting history must be pieced together. Meanwhile, there are challenges to address. There is very little in terms of hunting clothing that have survived, and as far as I'm aware, no female hunting garment prior to 1800 exists. Here, we rely on descriptions found in historical sources. Finally, throughout this process, not all garments were able to be mounted for photographing for the digital rendering. However, the study was helped by the intimate access, by gaining intimate access to historical clothing, objects, and source material and expertise via the incredible collaborations with the Society of Antiquaries, the Royal Dress Collection at Historical Palaces, the V&A Museum in the UK, the Livrustkammaren, and the Slottsarkivet in Stockholm, and the Stadskonstsammlungen at the Residenzschloss in Dresden, and the Cleveland Museum of Art and the Chicago Museum of Art in the US. The lecture this evening aims to share the research I've been conducting and the preliminary findings of this research. The conclusive results will be published in 2 separate journal articles. With this in mind, I will not be covering everything. Thus, my presentation is divided into 4 parts to give you an overview of the research I have been working on. First, I will give you a brief overview of the study of historical dress related to hunting, particularly the garments examined. Second, I will highlight the material culture of hunting through the objects and buildings used for the hunt. Next, I will showcase the digital renderings that have been produced in the project thus far and explain the methodological approach in the production of these renderings. I will conclude my presentation by providing a few key points from the preliminary findings. Ultimately, I argue against the idea of early modern hunting as being solely understood as a spectacle. Instead, hunting was a complex, ephemeral, multifaceted cultural practice that was employed for a variety of means that ranged from a spectacle to a personal pursuit. The evidence for this is not just the textual sources that recount the pleasure and passion of the hunt, but also the material culture of the hunt. To get started, it is important understanding the physical nature of hunting. The evidence I have examined affirms that hunting can be categorized into 2 forms, spectacle and sport. A spectacle hunting involved hunting from a stand, herding deer into water, the barbaric practice hunting with hounds. The image that you see up at the top is what they call boar and fox tossing, which essentially what happens is you would get a boar or you would get a fox, you would put it on this particular piece of material, throw it up into the air, and as the boar or the fox is coming down, you would shoot it, and you would shoot it before it hits the ground. Depended on the types of hunting that were used. In early modern Europe, there were several types of hunting that were pursued. The parforce hunting, chasing the game on horseback, the water hunts, which you see in the bottom picture on this slide. Spectacles involving multiple people and use of hounds. The stand hunting, where you're shooting from an actual stand, the for fox and boar tossing, and then falconry. The most common types were used for parforce hunting or the chase, driving game past a stand or a viewing platform, and falconry and hawkery. According to the hunting literature and treatises of the day, the types of hunters required expert knowledge, experience, and skills. Let's take, for instance, parforce hunting and the chasing of prey on horseback. This type of hunting required incredible physical strength and demand of the individual's body. First, the hunter needed to have riding skills, including the legs to maintain a strong grip around the sides of the horse. The hunter's core and posture had to be centered and secure to be able to move and pivot while the chase is happening. And then having to have an experienced horse as well as a bond with it to communicate so that the chase would not be hindered. During the 16th and 17th century, the pursuit of hunting was a commonplace elite activity and necessary skill that was entrenched in the social and cultural fabric of European society. This is perhaps due to the fact that hunting was a common means of exercising authority and rule not only over people, but over the animals and lands within the royal and princely domains. In a broad sense, Hunting was a natural substitute for warfare and a form of martial hunting training, a symbol of chivalric culture and a form of exercise that was an acceptable alternative to idleness. Therefore, the practice and culture of hunting encompassed many components, from the hunting personnel, the equipment, the animals hunted, used for the hunt, the spatial movements in pursuit of the game, the natural environment, and the residents. In fact, hunting has been described by early modern contemporaries in various ways, including hunting was ordained first for men of noble kind. However, early modern hunting was a complex and enigmatic enterprise that was both formal and informal, ceremonial and personal, public and private. Hunting was mobile, unreliable, and fluid. Thus, the ephemerality and formality of the hunt created moments of closeness and opportunity for private, personal conversation, while it also fostered a collaboration and cooperation dynamic that added to the camaraderie between huntsmen and increased the personal sociability of the hunt. Given this contextual understanding, the clothing and material objects impact or play a role in the hunting practice. We see the physicality within the artistic depiction, like the Devonshire tapestry at the V&A Museum. Perhaps the most relevant and important image of this study is the Lucas Cranach painting seen here, Hunting near Hawkenfels Castle, from 1540, which is housed at the Cleveland Museum of Art. At first glance, the painting depicts a hunt as a chaotic scene of different types of hunting, engaged simultaneously, and the hunting party fragmented between these different hunts. However, a normal hunt in the 16th and 17th century Europe would not have had different types of hunting being pursued at the same time. As such, the painting presents an overview of the idealized type. Now taking a closer look at the materiality depicted in the painting, like the contrasting forms of dress, the objects associated with hunting, and the various individuals socializing. In the lower left corner, the hunting personnel were seen as matching hunting uniforms. They appear to be basic constructions and simply designed. Alternatively, in the boat, we have members of the hunting party engaged in conversation. The dress styles depicted here are more elaborate and accessorized than the hunting personnel. The female figures are presented as being spectators of the hunt. Across the river, a group of women accompanied by a huntsman. This scene is unique in many ways. It's featuring a woman with a martial stance. Most of the portraits that depict women hunting show them with a weapon by their side or someone holding a weapon for them. This is because the masculine and aggressive stance would have been unladylike for the time. What is more interesting is that the woman with the gun raised is Sybil von Cleve, the wife of the Ernestine Prince and Elector of Saxony, Johann Friedrich, in the midst of her court maidens. However, Sybil and her ladies are all wearing costly clothing that is easily damaged. And as one German scholar has noted, this depiction, quote, puts a limit on the realistic expectations of hunting. Overall, the painting tells us that sumptuous clothing was used for hunting. Both men and women participated in the hunt as spectators and active hunters, and that the hunt was a sociable pursuit. Now, if we compare the practicality, physicality, and realistic activities of hunting, the discrepancies that we see between the two are just to ask what hunting garments existed for hunting and what still survived. With this in mind, there are three types of garments that were studied in this project: a leather jerkin, a hunting jacket, and falconry and hawking gloves. In analyzing these garments, the aim was to identify the garments were used for which form of hunting and explain how and why they were connected to the form of hunting. For this approach, I used General Arnold's methodology of photographing garments, close examination and tacit analysis of the garment, and comparatively examining other surviving pieces of historical dress that were specific to certain cultures, but were similar to the garments that were employed in the study. And expanding on Arnold's methodology, the photographs and analysis of the garment were used to produce 3D models and digital reconstruction, which will be discussed later in my presentation. In addition to Arnold's analytical methodology, I've utilized her published research, along with incorporating the seminal work of Maria Hayward. This research helps to analyze, contextualize, and explain the material significance of the hunt. The first type of historical dress that was studied was the jerkin. For this, I was able to examine two leather jerkins, one with sleeves and one without, at the Royal Dress Collection with Historical Royal Palaces, and an embroidered jerkin at the Litteraturskammaren in Stockholm. In 1971, Arnold completed a study of three jerkins. For the study, she examined two from the collection in Los Angeles and the fragments of a leather jerkin at the Guildhall Museum in London, now known as the Museum of London Docklands. Arnold's study of the jerkins led her to conclude that jerkins were, quote, masculine garments, sleeveless jackets, while leather jerkins provided, quote, protection against the cold and wet. It is a shield against sharp corners, hard objects, and missiles. And that before 1600, they were, quote, worn in connection with armor. Arnold's conclusions reinforced my findings thus far. The leather buff jerkin, which is on the right-hand side of the slide, at the Royal Dress Collection is dated from 1640 to 1645 and is associated with Charles I of England. The second leather jerkin is dated from around 1640 and is also associated with Charles I. In fact, the second leather jerkin is believed to have been made specifically for Charles. The leather jerkin, the leather buff jerkin, is larger than of the two jerkins. It is unique because it's a cross between the leather jerkin and a military buff coat. It appears that it was once a leather jerkin, but the sleeves were added later, making it more of a buff coat. It appears that it was once a leather. It's clear that the sleeves were added later because of how haphazardly the sleeves were sewn onto the leather jerkin with uneven stitching, as compared to other stitches on the jerkin around the collar and the shoulders. It was believed that Charles wore the jerkin at the time of the English Civil War. The jerkin material is of good quality, thick, oiled buff leather, and it was certainly meant to protect and keep the wearer warm. Interestingly, this type of garment would have been accessible to the elite and non-elite. The smaller second jerkin is much nicer in its construction. However, in the back, there appears to be a hole and part of the garment was removed. The curators at the Royal Dress Collection are unsure why and how the garment was damaged before it came to them. The waist measures 89 centimeters and the full length of the jerkin is 100 centimeters, thus clearly intended for a smaller person. In examining the jerkin with the curators, I believe that the jerkin might not have been worn by and made for Charles I, but instead was intended for a woman based on the flare of the panels at the bottom of the jerkin and the slight curvature in the bust area. However, the curators can only rely on the provenance detail. More importantly, the smaller leather jerkin seems to be designed to function as a layer of protection on the battlefield. This is evident with the bigger panel placed on the front of the jerkin, which would have been consistent with covering the legs that were often exposed while on horseback. Comparatively, the leather jerkin at the Museum of London is made of brown Spanish leather with ornate detailing and lattice work. The jerkin is identified as having been worn by a young person, yet the niceness of the garment certainly suggests it is connected to someone of rank and status. However, the leather jerkin is a nice contrast to the leather jerkin at the Royal Dress Collection. So what do these leather jerkins have to do with hunting? Leather jerkins were primarily used for warfare or hunting because they were of a material that protected and acted in ways like a shield, as Arnold observed, against harm. The design of the jerkin is in general, it allowed for more maneuverability and flexibility, which would have supported hunting or battle practices. Consequently, few leather jerkins survived. Therefore, the ability to study the jerkin has only generated further information that reinforces our understanding of the jerkin as a garment connected to hunting. The other unique feature of the jerkin is that it appears to have been an early form of a gender-neutral garment, as both men and women wore leather jerkins. Yet the question remains, how do we know leather jerkins were worn and made for the hunt? Well, Maria Hayward provided convincing evidence indicating that in 1526, Henry VIII of England had quote, hunting green items ordered, including a jerkin of green leather. Furthermore, Queen Elizabeth I of England and Queen Christina of Sweden were expert huntresses who pursued the practice with fervor. Given this, it is exciting, although not surprising, that clothing inventories of Christina and Elizabeth confirm that they both owned multiple jerkins. Elizabeth owned leather and embroidered jerkins, while Christina's inventory not only lists multiple leather jerkins, but also lists other hunting garments, including a hunting coat, hunting boots, and hunting gloves. Alternatively to the leather jerkin, the embroidered jerkin at the Livers Feminine in Stockholm was certainly a piece created and designed to be displayed as part of a spectacle. The jerkin has 2 lions embroidered on the front panels, while floral ornamentation of blue, green, and red silk are spread out across the jerkin, along with the fruit and berry decoration in green silk with pink, red, and light blue silk threaded throughout. The edge of the jerkin is trimmed with silver and gold thread. It is 73 centimeters in the front, from the shoulder to the bottom of the garment, 107 centimeters at the waist, and the width across the back is 39 centimeters. This embroidered jerkin is dated from 1620 and belonged to King Gustav Adolphus II of Sweden, also Queen Christina's father. This richly ornate jerkin was possibly worn for a stage hunt, meant to display wealth, status, and power. The jerkins that were examined were worn and used by the elite, and emphasizes that similar to the use of day and evening wear, hunting garments existed for both personal and recreational pursuits of hunting, and the stage hunting spectacle. The next type of historical dress offers a slightly different perspective of hunting garments, and has its own interesting history. This 17th century green and gold knitted Italian jacket is preserved at the Cleveland Museum in the US. At first glance, the jacket appears well constructed and made of fine materials. However, upon close examination, the jacket is incredibly thin and rather small. It measures 40 centimeters from shoulder to shoulder, 38 centimeters across the bust area, 36.5 centimeters at the waist, and the sleeves are 60 centimeters in length. The small size of the hunting jacket could possibly indicate that it was worn by a woman, but it was most likely for a child, which I will explain in a moment. The sizing information, however, has highlighted a discrepancy regarding the wearer of the jacket. In a 2013 article, the jacket was referred to by the author as a cassaca femminile, or a female tunic. There are 2 critical problems with this reference. First, the article's inference that the garment was female is not explained and has no citation of historical evidence that supports this label. Furthermore, nowhere in the Cleveland Museum of Art Provenance record is there information that supports this inference. In fact, in their catalog, the garment is specifically listed as a knitted hunting jacket. Additionally, a 2023 article in the journal Dress refers to the jacket as a knitted hunting jacket. The issue is that this is misleading and inaccurate information that distorts the history of the garment. Now, this is not to say that it was not worn by a woman. Much like the jerkin, different types of knitted jackets were most likely worn by both men and women. Also, as I will elucidate in a moment, the hunting jacket is a livery garment for hunting personnel. Therefore, a woman could not have worn the jacket because women were not appointed into official hunting positions. However, children could have worn the hunting jacket as livery, because there were certain positions that were designated for children. One such position was the children of the leash, who were responsible for handling and preparing dogs for the hunt, including holding them before the hunt and collecting the dogs from the field or forest after the hunt. The second problem with the article's label is that the garment is referred to as a tunic, which is also incorrect. Tunics were traditionally like shirts, a garment that went over the head. It is understood that tunics did not have the full opening in the front like the hunting jacket does. Although some tunics were half open like a smock or shirt, the hunting jacket cannot be categorized as a tunic. With these conditions in mind, the focus of the hunting jacket is on its purpose as a livery jacket. Hayward has emphasized the importance of livery as a uniform connected to royal and noble households, of which hunting personnel was a part of. Furthermore, livery garments were visual displays of wealth, status, and communicated a certain degree of prominence and power. As such, the stage hunting spectacles would have had hunting personnel on full display, and uniforms would not only have made it easier to see the huntsman, but would have enhanced the hunting event. Thus, livery garments had to be vibrant and in some ways had to be cost effective. The knitted hunting jacket is certainly vibrant, festive, and has a rich, luxurious element to it. It is evident by the green and gold threads. In fact, Hayward remarked that the use of two colors, particularly related to clothing and material objects, was a distinctive feature of livery garments. She further adds that huntsmen were often dressed in, quote, livery of green. Perhaps more importantly, medieval and early modern contemporaries not only depicted what huntsmen wore, but also provided instructions for what to wear for the hunt, emphasizing that huntsmen were supposed to wear lightweight garments that were green. One Elizabethan contemporary wrote that huntsmen, quote, should be lightly clad, having good boots and high, with a horn about his neck. Phoebus saith that they ought to be clad in green when they hunt the hart or buck, and in russet when they hunt the boar. But I remit the colors to the fantasies of men. The final observation that I would like to make about the hunting jacket is that I was shocked by how thin, as I previously mentioned, the garment was. While it was well constructed with quality material, it is not durable enough to sustain the rigors of recreational hunting, given how much movement was required and being exposed to the natural elements during the hunt. As for a staged hunt, the jacket probably would have held up if the huntsman were just herding deer past the display stand or shooting platform, but it was probably only good for one event. The final type of hunting garment that was studied is hunting and falconry gloves. Luckily, there are several falconry gloves that survived and are preserved across Europe. There are 4 pairs that were studied, 3 pairs with the Glove Collection Trust in the UK and 1 from the Bavarian National Museum in Munich. These gloves reflect the duality of hunting material culture, decorated garments for spectacles or practical garments for sport. The first pair of gloves are identified as menswear gauntlet hunting gloves and are dated from 1630 to about 1650. They are made of white suede leather with an embroidered design featuring richly robed ladies, a stag hunt, and other animals and plants, and colored silks and metal threads. Similar to the hunting jacket, these gloves were meant to be displayed through stage hunting spectacles. Gloves like these are an integral part of the hunt as a spectacle. They were not only visible garments, and as Evan Welch contends, they were expressions of rank, but they were also expressions of power, connected both to the sartorial practices and materiality of gloves through their craftsmanship, design, production, and use. Comparatively, this German glove, on the right-hand side of the slide, the German glove is listed as a Falconer Hundschuss. It's a falconer glove, and it's dated from 1650 to 1695. This glove is made of buff leather with embroidery detailing using green silk and silver gilded thread and 10 wood buttons and loop closures underneath. The well-worn glove combines decoration and function, with the top of the hand and the under part of the arm containing the embroidery, while the top of the forearm has no embroidery detail to allow the falcon to grip the glove and perch. A very interesting point about this glove, I'm not sure if the connection has been discovered or if the institutions are aware, as neither museums have stated it, but the glove at the Bavarian National Museum is a twin of the glove that is preserved and displayed at the Burrell Collection Museum in Glasgow. The twin glove in Glasgow is part of a set of falconry accessories. Simultaneously, the use of ordinary plain gloves, like the other 2 pairs from the Glove Collection Trust, were intended to emphasize the communication and nonverbal display of knowledge, skill, and experience through the materiality. The brown gloves are listed as menswear large gauntlet gloves and are broadly dated from the 17th century. Made of buff suede leather, it is clear that these gloves were used extensively for falconry, as evidenced by the distressed leather at the fingers, the blood stains and small holes that were likely created from the falcon or hawk gripping or pecking the glove. These dark brown gloves are identified as menswear hunting or falconry gloves and are broadly dated from the 17th century. Both of these pairs of gloves illustrate the practicality and technicality of hunting garments. While deer hunting required wearing green to blend in with the natural surrounding of the hunt, thereby increasing the hunt, the use of thick leather gloves was a means of protection while engaging with birds of prey used for the hunt. Furthermore, these gloves were most certainly used by both noblemen and their head falconers during staged and recreational hunts. The study of these hunting garments has demonstrated that the hunt was an ephemeral activity, where the materiality and historical dress enabled hunting to function as a cultural practice shifting between dual aspects of spectacle and recreation, display and action, performativity and pursuit, ideal and reality. Historical dress is just one aspect of hunting's multifaceted material culture. Hunting was a cross-cultural activity that connected, intersected, encompassed, and engaged diverse aspects of daily life, from people, animals, and environment to object, knowledge, and skill. And I argue hunting was an important form of tangible and intangible cultural heritage, as evidenced by how prevalent and widespread the practice was. Therefore, to underscore the sociability, cultural exchange, and shared experiences shaped by the material culture of hunting, I want to briefly highlight the objectual, architectural, and environmental materiality of hunting. It is important to understand that material culture is basically the materiality of everyday experiences and everyday social practices. To start, hunting as a cultural practice did not happen without tools used to effectively kill an animal target. One tool was a bird of prey, falcons or hawks trained to chase and kill targets, such as other birds, and smaller animals like rabbits. Likewise, hunting hounds were a tool. It was, however, weapons that were the primary tool used in hunting practices. Weapons ranged from spears and traps, while the crossbow was the most common weapon used by both men and women before the proliferation of guns. Although not a complicated weapon to use, the crossbow did require knowledge, skill, and strength to use. Perhaps an intriguing element about weapons, particularly crossbows, is that they were personalized and collected by the early modern European elite. The materiality and personalization of weapons revealed aspects of the hunter's identity, personality, and reputation, as well as visually demonstrating their knowledge and skills. It should also be noted that materialized hunting practices are characterized by these shared experiences and shared objects of hunting. Queen Christina of Sweden is just one example of many for which the materiality and personalization of hunting weapons only reinforced her identity as an independent and active queen, while also reinforcing her knowledge and skills as a hunter. Case in point, Christina's crossbow is preserved at the Ludwigskammaren in Stockholm, dated from 1646. Now, I should mention here that Christina has an extensive armory collection, of which she owns 57 guns and 6 different crossbows. What makes this crossbow unique is the context and design of the crossbow. It's made of walnut with a steel bow attached to the hemp lacing and a German lock mechanism. The size and the stock of the crossbow are inlaid with engraved bones. The most important and intriguing of the engraved bones is on the stock. The engraving is of a woman seated with a crossbow aimed at a target set inside the door, depicted, and this picture is depicted out of it. Behind the woman is a man holding another crossbow. The image is fantastic for several reasons. First, as I previously mentioned, the depiction of a woman with a weapon drawn or aimed was something rare because A, using weapons, especially martial weapons, was not appropriate for women. And B, it was unacceptable for women to be engaged in masculine male activity. Thus, the image depicts women in a different light. Second, there is no evidence that indicates that the woman in the engraving is Christina. It's entirely possible that the female figure represents women like Christina. who has proficient knowledge and experience in using crossbows. Additionally, the male figure is poised behind the woman and appears to be prepping the crossbow as a hunting servant would. Most likely, I would figure this would be the master of the crossbow. This interpretation would support the idea that the female figure represents an elite woman like Christina. Third, the clothing that the figures are wearing what seems like garments similar to the jerkin and a hunting jacket. For the female figure, she appears to be wearing a garment consisting of two separate pieces, a top and a skirt. It is not unusual for women to wear separates in the early modern period. What I'm most captivated by is the woman's top has short sleeves, rather than long sleeves that were common to the period. Also, the top has panels on the lower part of it, which appears to imitate the leather jerkin at the royal dress collection. I believe that this is most likely a jerkin, especially if we consider that leather jerkins were fast-woven garment of protection. As for the male figure, the top garment appears to be a simple plain jacket with no embellishments or accessories to signify his rank. This would support the interpretation that the male figure is a servant. Finally, it is believed that the crossbow was created and designed as a personal gift for Christina by one of her courtiers. As such, the materiality of the crossbow reinforces Christina's identity, knowledge, and skills as a huntress. Another object is Christina's coronation saddle. What makes this part of the study is the fact that the coronation saddle fits the description of a hunting saddle in an account by her courtier, Johann Ekblad. Also dated in 1646, during her coronation, Christina could not ride in the saddle. Instead, she rode in a carriage. In the procession, Christina's horse was saddled and led ahead of the carriage. This situation was meant to symbolically represent the two bodies of Christina. The male body of Christina as king was symbolized and displayed through the horse and saddle, while Christina's female body was carried in the carriage. With this in mind, one of the most interesting parts of the saddle is that there's not a second pommel needed for side saddle, needed to ride side saddle. This is a clear indication that Christina rode astride. I hope to uncover more and confirm my preliminary findings regarding the crossbow and engraving and the hunting saddle as part of my ongoing research on Christina of Sweden. Finally, moving away from objects, I want to illuminate hunting logic of materiality and material culture. Hunting logic are elements of material culture and the materiality to the practice and sociability of the culture of the hunt. One of the most inherent aspects of the activity of hunting is that it was a cultural practice that was sustained across time and found in the material culture, the cultural heritage. Rightly so, material culture must be understood as practices expressed and embedded in the material objects. But more importantly, material culture, in the case of hunting laws, play a role in everyday social practice and experience. With royal and princely residences and hunting lodge, there was an essential element of elite material culture, because these sites functioned as sites of interaction, negotiation, and sociability. The material culture of hunting across Europe is rich, from the surviving hunting residences map to the clothing and equipment used for the hunt. Yet the availability of hunting structures and objects not only tells the story of public and ceremonial role of hunting in early modern Europe, but also the communal personal role of hunting. For the last section of my presentation, I want to highlight the digital research methodology that was incorporated into the project. Within the field of archaeology, material culture, and fashion and dress history, there is a growing emphasis and push toward what Hilary Davidson has identified as an embodied turn. This embodied turn incorporates what Davidson defines as the process of, quote, incorporating embodied, experiential, implicit, and tacit knowledge, again through making and doing within historical research. At the same time, Hilary Lynn has rightly asserted that the challenge of studying historical dress, and indeed the study of objects and building from the perspective of materiality and material culture through surviving material sources is, quote, working out how these pieces look from the back, were assembled, and how they formed a unified whole. As such, in response to the embodied turn and challenges of material culture research, has been to employ alternative methods of research. One such method is the hands-on experimentation and analysis of reconstruction. As a leading scholar on the experimental reconstruction of historical garments, Sarah Bendel has convincingly demonstrated and argued that experiential reconstruction and remaking will supplement historical records elite further meaning from more traditional sources, and develop and equip researchers with tacit knowledge of material things. Inspired by the interdisciplinary research, especially archaeological digital practices, expanding on general process of examining, documenting, photographing, remaking, and utilizing my passion for digital history, I've employed the use of 3D modeling and digital reconstruction. My methodology consists of identifying surviving materials connected to the practice of hunting in the 16th and 17th century, photographing and analyzing them, comparing them with historical records and images, and producing, where possible, 3D models. There were challenges, particularly in gaining access to the objects for study and being able to photograph them in 360 degrees around the items. In producing the 3D models, I engaged in the archaeological process of photogrammetry that involved precise process and extensive amount of photos, along with using the Aegisoft 3D modeling software. To my knowledge, and reinforced by my archaeological colleagues, this is the first time photogrammetry and Aegisoft has been used with historical garments. As such, it was a tricky and challenging process, but worthwhile. As for the digital reconstruction, I am still in the process of completing this. However, a brief explanation will hopefully give you all something to look forward to. The digital reconstruction approach involved photographing the baton altar cloth, which features embroidery of hunting scenes and elements of nature. It also uses Arnold's 16th century dress pattern, portraits, and images of Elizabeth I, and historical source material to reconstruct the lost dress of Elizabeth I through Flow 3D software. The aim is to reconstruct the lost dress of Elizabeth based on historical evidence through collaborating with Marit Kalmakerki at Aalto University and Elizabeth Thompson at the Royal Dress Collection to produce a visualization of the dress that provides us with more information about the baton altar cloth and Elizabethan historical dress, and to confirm that the baton altar cloth is part of the dress. There is a number of reasons why I chose to incorporate this methodological approach and produce the digital rendering. It was for a means of helping to document and preserve historical garments and objects. It was a means to visualize and analyze garments in order to uncover material characteristics not readily visible, such as textile patterns, layered construction of hunting garments, sewing and stitching techniques, the fit and how the garments were worn, and illuminating the tension and movement of hunting garments. To gain tacit knowledge and develop research skills through experiential methodology, and to produce the first ever digital rendering of hunting garments. And now I would like to present to you all the first glimpse of 3 digital renderings from the project. The leather buff jerkin from the Royal Dress Collection, the leather jerkin from the Royal Dress Collection, and Christina's saddle from the Livruz Cabinet. Now, these are digital 3D models that can be moved and moved around. It's not here, but at a certain point, once I finish going through all of them and making sure that the designs are nice, they will be uploaded to a website that people can freely go and move it around themselves as a means of studying garments, of studying objects in this way. So this is what the leather buff jerkin looks like in the 3D model. In the actual model itself, you can turn it around, you can see the different, you can see underneath it, all of that. This is what the leather jerkin, the smaller of the two, looks like in the Royal Dress Collection with the reconstruction. And this is the reconstruction, digital reconstruction of the saddle. To conclude, I would now like to present you my preliminary findings. There's 3 points. The materiality and material culture of hunting was entrenched in early modern society and is key to identifying the characteristics of the cultural history and heritage of hunting practices, as well as the shared experiences of early modern people. In order to continue understanding this hunting history, we must examine the materiality and material culture. Historical garment, dress, and garment of hunting illuminate how the practice of hunting was intersectional and involved gender, socioeconomic status, and power. And 3, the use of digital tools is a fantastic way to enhance historical research. And this has provided new opportunities to preserve, uncover, and understand the materiality and material culture of hunting in early modern Europe. Thank you.
Justin, would you like to unshare your screen? That was a very splendid talk. I'm myself someone who's not thought about this very much before. I'm very interested in both your methods and your conclusions. What I'd like to do is to invite people on the line to put any questions they've got into the chat. And I will then sort of convey them to you and the broader audience. I wonder whether I can take sort of chair privilege in starting off with a sort of observation and a comment. I'm very struck with the gender aspects of this, and both in terms of the items of dress you're looking at and the accoutrements of hunting, and also the artworks. And I just wonder the extent to which the hunting clearly provides something of a context where you can move outside normal sort of gender expectations. And I wonder the extent to which that was something that was confined only to royalty, or whether how far down, in a sense, the social hierarchy we might expect that to spread.
That's exactly my whole career is studying the gender differences, or particularly focusing on female hunting. It started with my PhD, as my supervisor will attest to. I got so excited about it. Yes, what I have argued and what I find and constantly try to emphasize within historical research is that hunting, being ephemeral and being a connection place, a space, but also an activity that brought people together. It also allowed, it was very informal, so it allowed people to operate outside the boundaries and the confines and the structures and the rituals and the ceremonials of everyday life. And what you often see, in the case of Elizabeth I, she often would particularly her ambassadors would call and discuss the fact that she's away on hunting. They can't have an audience with her because she's off hunting. This was a way of her granting and denying access to her. As far as women engaging in the hunt, a lot of Elizabeth's ladies in waiting hunted with her. So the idea, and I have yet to find a reference, but they're all hunting within their own estates and all this stuff. It makes me wonder if there's not an all-female hunting group that's going off, and doing this. Within Europe, particularly Northern Europe, we see women hunting more often than we see, more acceptable as well. Because of the climate and the natural biomes, I think, of Northern Europe, women have to do this. They have to engage in the hunt, particularly when we get around the 7 Years' War in Northern Europe, all the men are off fighting. Women have to then at that point to be able to take care of it. The other interesting thing when it comes to gender and considering about hunting, which is a project that I want to do in the future, is looking at women from below. There's a certain number of cases that I found that women who are hunting for everyday survival, who are middle or to lower classes, they're arrested for hunting. They're tried for hunting crimes of poaching and all of this. That's where we see them. They're not off celebrating the hunt or engaging in it with fervor like the other women, the elite women are. They're actually they're having to survive, and they're being punished for it. So that's kind of what I see from the below and above. I hope that answered your question.
Very much so. There's a question from John Cooper about firearms. You mentioned several examples. Is there any symbolic or cultural difference between hunting with firearms and using traditional weapons, crossbows, spears, etc.?
This is something that I think is going to be kind of the next phase that I look at. But what I have uncovered or identified so far, let's go back to the boar and fox tossing, which when I came across that, it's not in any other culture other than Germany. It's not in Italy, France, or England, or Northern Europe. With that said, what we see, particularly and in kind of association with the boar and fox tossing, is the aggressiveness, the masculinity, the chivalric nature of hunting. what you often see is men will often use the spears or use the crossbow because they're more primitive means of engaging and connecting to kind of, I guess, the more martial, militaristic, or animalistic side of hunting that it comes down. What I don't see is I don't see women using the spear. There is one particular case where it's interesting that Queen Christina of Sweden used a sword to kill a wolf, which, again, being a queen and being a woman, they were not supposed to chase off the wolves. And at most courts, there was a wolf hunter. But Christina went and killed a very nuisance wolf that was happening in the area. So, yes, I think so far there is a cultural difference with the use of weapons, and particularly a gender cultural difference of the use of weapons.
Question that's come in through the other channel, so to speak. Did women use different hunting boots from men?
Now, this is something I read recently, and I have not examined, but it's very interesting, is they were slightly different, particularly from the 1700s to the 1800s. It seemed that men had a heel, and it kept getting bigger and bigger for the boots for hunting. Women, I don't see, I have not come across a case where female boots have been used for hunting. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means that I've still got a lot of sources to go through and a lot of research to do. But it recently came across that, there was an indication that there is a difference in terms of hunting boots.
And there's a question then from Craddock Peters asking about the digital methods and how it's done with photogrammetry, I think, isn't it?
Yes. So the digital method that I use is photogrammetry, which some people use lasers, but I use photographs. And what that entails and what that very painstakingly is that you have a garment that's mounted on a particular form, and you literally have to take pictures around, but they have to have an overlap of about, I think it's like 7 centimeters or something. They have to have an overlap. And so you have to go through, but then you have to do it from below, and then you have to do it from the top. So you're getting basically about between 80 to 100 photos, and they have to be clear, and they have to also have something to connect to in the background so that when you put it into the software, it can then pinpoint and kind of figure out the mold. So that was the photogrammetry part. And then the software was Aegisoft software. Once you get through and you do all of that modeling, and you have to edit it, which is what I'm doing right now, because sometimes it picks up and it sees a white mask between it, so it just creates something there. So then you have to edit it out. But I hope that answers your question. Paradox?
There's a question here from Liz Hallam Smith saying, thanks for the paper. Did Christina's saddle include stirrups? Were these needed for stability?
Not the coronation saddle, but yes, for the hunting saddle, it described your stirrup, but the coronation saddle did not include stirrups.
And then you talk about birds of prey in hunting. Did early modern princes use big cats for hunting as well?
The references that I've come across with the use of cats has been Eastern Europe, has been into Asia and the Middle East. Those are where we see the cats used for hunting. I have not come across any instance of cats being used in French hunting, English, Italian, the German-speaking areas, the Spanish-speaking areas, or Northern Europe, the Nordic areas.
And I think the last question here is from Amy saying, what intersection have you found between engagement in hunting and interest in other animal sports and the class associations, bear baiting, bullfighting, etc.?
I haven't. This is a really good question, because I have wondered if they're, particularly the cultural practice, wanting to hunt the biggest game and go through that. I haven't found a connection yet. I know that Henry VIII had bears, did bear baiting in London, but it seems to be very completely different than the actual practices of hunting, which is chasing, and that's the key there. What you see in Northern Europe is you see more of the chase and the hunting of bears, the hunting of elk, and the hunting of wolves. But I haven't found a connection between bear baiting and bullfighting. But I welcome those connections. If you find them, I would love to hear about them.
And there's one final one just come in from Elizabeth Miller saying in the Cranach painting, we have liveried male huntsmen on the left wearing the same colours as the women with crossbow on the right. What are you making of that?
Well, if you look at the painting, they're green. So if you look at the women and the men, and you look at the servants, there is a couple of yellow, and then there's a woman or two in yellow, then there's blue, and then there's green. I'm taking this as the color and kind of like basically color coordinating, matching up. These are your servants, they're with you. That's what I'm distinguishing. The other question that I had about this is it just the Cranach use of the colors to try to distinguish between the different people, or just to give the painting more color and scope in that? Because what I found interesting is that there's green in there, but the garments should mostly be green because that is the practice. And even in, I think, the instructions for Johann Friedrich's hunting personnel, it describes the livery being green. So this is, I take this as Cranach's artistic license, so to speak.
Thank you. Dustin, you've given us a splendid lecture. If we were in the room, you would have very loud applause at this moment. So can you accept our virtual applause, and thanks for what's a very splendid talk. I'm very pleased to see money from the Janet Arnold Fund being used in such an effective way to produce such interesting new scholarship. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for your great questions. And again, thank you and the Society for the amazing support. It was an incredible, awesome, a great project to work on. So thank you for that.
I'll close the meeting by giving notice that the next lecture will be on Thursday, the 22nd of February, when we'll hear a paper, Iron Road, Writing the History of the Railway from 1750 to 1850 by